What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, Fightful.com. Here with Gregory Iron. How you doing, man?
Not bad. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. We're in Cleveland. I was looking around for people that I could interview in Cleveland. I'm not up this way a lot. Your name came up, and I was like, man, that's a guy I've never got to talk to. I've never got to interview you via phone or anything like that. Fresh experience here.
Yeah, and in person's the way to do it.
It is. I used to do everything by phone. And then I saw Chris Van Vliet, who's like the interview king.
He really is.
He's outstanding at it. And of course, he moves an hour away from where I live. So he's getting everybody around here. But I see how people open up a little bit more. That it's a little bit more of a comfortable setting. And glad you could be out here. Now, I mean, you're a name that's been at the forefront for quite a while in independent wrestling. And I know you get asked about the CM Punk endorsement a whole lot. I mean, how big was that for you when it happened?
It was life-changing. I mean, I often talk about how it just wasn't like a big milestone for my career, but really my life. You know, at the time, I had lost my crappy retail job, and it was like this crossroads of like, do I keep sacrificing this time and money in hopes that someone recognizes how hard I'm working with cerebral palsy and one functioning arm and all this stuff, and just everything lined up in terms of like, you know, I remember watching Money in the Bank the week before with Johnny Gargano, who's one of my closest friends in the world. We were at some sports bar watching it, and that was like an incredible moment. So to think that 1 week later, because of, I don't know, like just I've always reached out for Colt Cabana for advice, and he always kept my story in mind, and for him to tell my story to Punk, and then Punk, who never met me, to come out there and say the things that he said about me and kind of launched my career and helped me start making money, it was just a justification of everything that I ever went through in my life, like the bullying, the struggles, the bad home life. It was an incredible moment.
And the thing is, you deliver in the ring, too. It's not just a good story. You deliver in the ring. You've got great character work, which we are going to get to later. I had somebody point out one promo in particular that I can't wait to ask you about. Have you heard from Punk since then? Has that ever come up again?
It's funny because so we had like an hour conversation after the endorsement, because when I saw him in the building that day, and I wanted to ask him for advice, but I didn't want to harass him. So then after he did the thing in the ring, I said, well, I guess what's he going to tell me, to F off? So I mean, I might as well walk up to him and see what I can get out of him. And we talked for like an hour, and we didn't exchange direct contact information, but he had me send him some stuff to give to the WWE offices and everything. And the only interaction I've had with him since then was... so I'm good friends with Andy Williams, who's in The Butcher and the Blade, and we love Sheets. And we were having one of our random interactions on social media about Sheets or Wawa, and out of nowhere, CM Punk chimes in to say that Wawa is better, and which was horrible because, like, look, we have a lot of followers on social media, but Punk overwhelms us with his followers. So for him to chime in and say Wawa, and then you got all the Wawa lovers jumping on board, and it just really buried the Sheets, and I was not very appreciative of that. So Punk, I love you. I appreciate what you did for me in 2011, but the whole Wawa Sheets debacle, I think that tweet was in 2016. I don't know if I can forgive that.
Well, Big E told me he was going to put his nuts on my shoulders one time on social media.
That's awful.
And I was like, well, thanks. And obviously, he's got a few more followers than me.
Quite a few, yeah.
CM Punk, definitely up there. Wish I could have seen that tweet. He blocked me because I tweeted about Joe Kenda one time. Are you familiar with Joe Kenda?
I am not.
Investigation Discovery?
Oh, okay.
Homicide Hunter.
Yeah, okay.
He's the guy that will always be like, well, after like some crazy murder happens, and I was like, I didn't even do anything. But he probably looked at my profile and saw writer and was like, blocked.
Well, you're blocked by CM Punk. I am blocked by Hulk Hogan.
I am too.
He's my all-time favorite, and I'm blocked by him. And I don't know specifically why, but I think it's because, and I'll send them to you if you would like. I screen capped a picture of him from like some random Saturday Night's Main Event. He's cutting this promo where he's making like a real sexy face like this, but then in the next scene he's like making a face like this. And I tweeted at him. I said, I only wish that I could look as handsome as Hulk Hogan one day. And and then that's the last I remember tweeting him. And then I remember I was sitting in Canada somewhere. I think it was with like Gargano and Candice, maybe for Smash Wrestling in Canada. And I'm just going through my Twitter, and I go to look at what Hulk Hogan's doing, and it says, this user has blocked you. And I had this moment where I was like, well, that has to be an error. And then I backed out, and I went back, and then it said, this user has blocked you. And then I looked up, and I was like,
all those vitamins and prayers were in vain.
Yeah, and so I actually met him a couple years ago, and Johnny kept saying, "You gonna tell him that he blocked you?" I'm like, absolutely not.
You should have.
No, it was like it would have been so awkward because like he is my all-time favorite, and like what Hulk Hogan was for me as a kid, Stone Cold was for me for an angsty teenager. So like those are my two favorites. So I'm like, I'm not gonna make this situation where I'm meeting Hulk Hogan for the first time completely awkward. Where it's like just imagine someone walked up to you and was like, "Hey man, you blocked me on Twitter. Can you unblock me?" And you'd probably be like,
happened.
Well, but there was probably a reason why I blocked you. Yeah. So like then you just feel like an idiot for being like, "Oh, could you unblock me?" So I just don't want to make that situation uncomfortable.
You never get to see the tweet, the "don't work yourselves into a shoot" tweet anymore. Arguably the greatest tweet in the history of the app.
Yes.
You mentioned Steve Austin. He actually encouraged you to do a podcast, right? The Iron On podcast.
Yeah, when I did his podcast almost 2 years ago now, we did one episode just about my career and stuff, and I didn't know what the situation was going to look like going over his house and spending time with him, and so after we finished the first podcast, he said, "What are you doing for the rest of the day? You want to hang out and do another podcast, talk about wrestling, talk about our favorite matches?" And I'm thinking to myself, no, Stone Cold Steve Austin. I've got better crap to do. But so I was like, yeah, of course. And so we just did this podcast where, so I guess to kind of backtrack a little bit, before I thought I could become a wrestler, I didn't think I could do so because of my disability. And so I thought if I could be a wrestling commentator, that would be the path to go. But I didn't think as a kid, well, all these guys have like notes in front of them and stuff. So I just committed stuff to memory. And so I have the most useless wrestling knowledge, especially WWF, like just memorize facts and statistics and like attendance records. And so for the first time in my life, as I'm podcasting with Stone Cold, my useless, pathetic WWE knowledge came in handy because I was able to set him up for his own stories, because some of my favorite matches do involve Stone Cold Steve Austin, and so I was able to throw dates at him and like put him in positions for stories. Like, we're talking about our favorite matches, and I said, can we talk about your 3 matches with The Rock at WrestleMania, because those are some of my favorite matches of all time? He's like, sure, we could talk about those. And then I said, Steve, now if you were to put those in order, how would you rank them? Because I would go 17, 19, 15, and I would put 15 last, not because it was a bad match, because I know going into that match you forgot your vest and you had to wear a t-shirt to the ring. He's like, God damn, kid. And then he goes into the whole story about WrestleMania 15, and I've heard it a million times, but to sit there in person and hear him tell me the story, it was unbelievable. And then after that fact, the feedback that he basically got from those episodes when we were talking on the phone, which is weird that me and Stone Cold talk on the phone, he said a lot of people said that they could see me interviewing him. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about doing a podcast? And I said, I don't know. Everyone does a podcast. But this last year was like the first year in my wrestling career that I decided I was just going to focus on wrestling and motivational speaking, which I've been doing on and off for years. And someone invested in podcasting equipment for me and said, do it. And I said, well, I have no excuses now, so I'm going all in on this stuff. And it's actually been quite enjoyable. It's like nice to sit with my friends and like pull stories out of them that maybe they've never told publicly, or just to get to know some of my peers better in this. This is the most organic way to do interviews. I feel like some guys have been like, well, let's just do it over the phone. I'm like, no, if you can't do it in person,
it's
like
so much
I
better
don't
in
want to
person.
do it. So it's been a pretty cool thing.
It's so much better in person. You're a colorful, easy for me to say, personality. And I've said for a long time on the WWE level, like Lillian Garcia is one of the best interviewers because they have a level of comfortability with her.
Sure.
They've worked with her. They respect her. And I get the feeling that's a lot of the same with you. They've worked with you. They respect you. They know that you know what you're talking about in that regard.
Yeah, and I feel like right now it's like there's going to be guys that like have bigger name value that I've watched on TV that maybe I want to sit down with. But right now, I'm just kind of trying to focus on like my friends and people that I've shared locker rooms with, because I already know stuff about them, and I do a lot of research too. Like sometimes I'm sitting down with my friends and I'm throwing stuff at them with this vast knowledge, and they're like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, I did my research. I'm taking this very serious, but also like I think there's a lot of podcasts out there, some very low bar podcast, and so like it's with those podcasts that might not have the most name recognition that these guys have done in the past, it's nice to go back and listen to those, because then I can take from their basic questions that they asked, where they're just kind of Googling or reading off Wikipedia, and then I can expand upon them and try to dig a little deeper and get some new content. And that's been the beauty of the podcast.
I'm excited to hear your vast knowledge. Like I want to hear you talk to somebody about like Buddy Landel versus Bret Hart on WWF Mania, December '95.
Yeah.
And then Buddy Landel slipped and broke his ass.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get into the Royal Rumble match.
It's unfortunate.
It is. They advertised him weeks after that too.
Terrible.
And when I grew up, I was like, man, they knew he wasn't going to be in there. How dare they false advertise Buddy Landel to me?
Well, they probably could have had him in the '96 Rumble because I actually just went back and watched the Rumbles because it's Rumble season, and like '95, '96, and '97, there were so many randos in that. Where like I remember watching it as a kid, like the '95 Rumble. When I saw like Dick Murdoch come to the ring, and I didn't know who Dick Murdoch was, I'm like, who's this fat, pudgy old man? But it's funny, but then on the other channel, my favorite wrestler is Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? So it's like, who's this old man? And then like, yay, Hulk Hogan.
Who were the big ass twins with the masks that were in the '95 Rumble? The squat team. It was the
96.
Oh,
96.
What's it, 96?
96, 95, you had the Blues, the Bruise Brothers. Or Jacob and Eli Blue.
Eli Blue. It's Ron and Don Harris. Yeah.
Yep. So.
Yeah, my God. So I got an interesting question that was submitted, and I was like, you know what? I've never had anybody ask that. If you could wrestle one president, living or dead, who would it be?
Well, you know, I like a challenge. And so I feel like if I were to pick someone, I would probably have to pick Abe Lincoln.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he does have a wrestling background from what I understand. You know, he did some fighting back in the day, and I think he would be quite the challenge. Plus, he was in, you know, he made that cameo, not actually Abe Lincoln, but, you know, he's in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And, you know, that's
big
a classic.
Boy. He's a big boy.
Absolutely a big boy. And I'm the underdog. So, I mean, that's the big guy, little man story. Like, I'm all about that.
Do you remember the Mountain Dew commercial? Where he's up there and he said, would the people like a reply? And then he said, I said, would the good people like a reply? And then he ripped off his shirt, cracked a chair over somebody.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it said, fact. Abraham Lincoln's favorite sport was wrestling.
Oh, wow. I don't remember that at all.
Oh, it's amazing.
Now I gotta go find it on YouTube.
It's one of the great commercials ever. Another question submitted. They wanted to hear the story behind you and Roddy Piper Gear cutting a promo in Dayton that they said got Dudley Boy's 99 heat.
Wow. It did get pretty good heat. But so here's the idea behind it. I know exactly what they're talking about. So Piper had just passed away a few weeks earlier. And so I have this like vintage Roddy Piper shirt that isn't the Hot Rod shirt that everyone wears. In fact, I wore it to a show not too long ago with Cole Cabana. He saw it. He was like, that was an official WWF release. And it was. It's like, it's got a drawing of Roddy Piper on it. And it's got him crossed out. It says, real men don't wear skirts. And it had to be released in like '85. It's a sweet, super thin, gray vintage shirt. And so I wore it to the ring, and I didn't know what I was going to do for the promo that night. But the week before, so I was doing this Iron Curtain thing. And I do it in different areas, and when I would do it, I would have different members. And this particular member was a kid by the name of Alex Daniels. The week before, we were wrestling on Wednesday night, so this was an every week thing. Week before, he did like some crazy 450 or 720 or something, and he like landed on his head. And somehow, he knocked himself out, but he wasn't actually injured. So he was going to wrestle again that night. When we got to the building, I saw that there was a wheelchair there, and so then all of a sudden, like my brain started like, you know, moving, and someone else had a neck brace. So I said, I have an idea, and my brain immediately went to Linda McMahon, WrestleMania 17, okay, because that's just iconic, right? And so the way they had the setup was ring and like ramp stage, like WCW style, going right to the ring. Yeah. And so I did this thing where. And Alex, for some reason, he wore the worst outfit of all time, which made it better. He wore like this stupid jacket and like jumpsuit combo thing and looked super depressed. And I put him in this wheelchair and I wheeled him out on the ramp, and I started cutting this promo about how, because I feel like when you do these like fake heel promos, but I'm going to be a good guy for 1 second because this is a real moment thing, you have to do a lot of quiet voice and a lot of ums, you know, like you're trying to find your thoughts, like when Randy Orton did it a couple weeks ago with the when he kicked AJ Styles he hit him with the RKO. I was like, this is totally a fake promo, because he's like, oh wow, and so you do a lot of uhs, and I'm cutting this promo and I say, you know, Alex Daniels last week, you know, he put his life on the line, you know, for you guys, and you know, it's just a miracle he's even out here in the condition he's in. So, you know, give it up for Alex Daniels, in the crowd, they have this moment where they're like, I think this is real, so I guess I have to clap for this guy, and I'm like, yeah. And so at the time, I was feuding with Zachary Wentz, who was very green, just starting out, and he came out there, and he comes to the ring, and he has to walk by Alex, who's in the wheelchair, and he's facing me. Alex is behind him, and we're cutting this promo, and we're talking about this match we're going to have on their iPay-per-view in a few days, and blah, blah, blah. Crowd's really buying him being in a wheelchair, and I say, you know what, though, Zach, I got one more thing to tell you. It's just when you think you have all the answers. And as I say that was the cue for Alex to stand up out of the wheelchair. So he stands up, and the whole crowd's like, oh, you son of a bitch.
That's amazing.
And I change the questions. He comes in the ring, starts beating the crap out of him, and we jump him. And so, yeah, it's funny that someone was in attendance to see that. That could tweet you about it, because I feel like that's like a moment that I had that kind of went under the radar. And I feel like I have a lot of heel promos like that where I just do, and just like, I don't know, like, I take a lot of pride in defying the odds in being a good bad guy, because when initially, when I was approached about it, like 10 years ago now, no one thought I could be a bad guy because I have cerebral palsy. And so I like a challenge, like I said. And so I can channel those feelings and that anger that I had as a kid when people would make fun of me. And like, I have this other perspective of like, people who would look at me like I'm disabled. But then I think to myself, these people that were making fun of me, like I would look at their own flaws, and I could go back to that place. And now as a adult wrestler man in spandex, I could channel those feelings. And like, that's how I knew I would be a bad guy, is because I take all these feelings that I have from when I was a kid and I flip them. I go, well, you look at me like I have a disability, but have you like took a look in the mirror lately? So I think that's how it works.
And it is interesting, because, like I said, when I solicited questions, lots of people were like, "Man, you're so motivating. You're so motivating." How do you balance that with being a heel character? I mean, is there balance? It's just like, here's the thing. So I think I've gotten lucky enough that my fan base understands, particularly on my social media, that we live in a time where everyone kind of wants to be in on the joke, you know what I'm saying? And so if I make one post, and I've done this before as like almost like a test, like I can make one post in the morning about something inspiring. I'm like, like let's get motivated today. Let's overcome the odds. I could be good guy Gregory Iron. And then middle of the day, I'm working somewhere else as a bad guy, so I want to promote what I'm doing there. So then I make a post about whatever angle I'm doing there, and it's like kind of passive aggressive or like being mean to fans or the particular wrestler. And then later in the night, I don't like to go too deep into my personal life, but sometimes, and I think this is more prevalent today in today's society. I struggle with mental health. A lot of people do. We have these moments where we feel alone, like there's no one there for us, and we can only go through these problems by ourselves. And I want to make people understand that, like, even though I'm in, I guess, the public eye, I struggle too. And so, like, I can make a post about something personal I'm going through, and I think people can relate to those in different ways, and they understand that, like, I think if you let the fans in on what you're doing and, like, don't treat them like they're idiots, they'll invest in you more. And that's kind of where the balance comes in, I guess. Yeah, I had a guy who I used to do a show with that wanted us to pretend to argue all the time, and I was like, I don't think they want
forced.
that. Yeah, it's so forced, and I'll tell you who it is off the air, and you won't be surprised.
Okay.
But I think being authentic is there's something unique about that. And I mean, even as far as the character stuff, I mean, you see Ethan Page, like, his thing out there is Ethan Page portrayed by Julian, and Jordan Grace portrayed by Trisha Parker. Like, they let you know that there's a difference. I think I was talking to Melina a while back, and she's in this unique situation where she's been a heel like her whole time, but she's actually, that's Melina Perez playing Melina. Wrestling is such a unique thing. You're playing to a crowd of witnesses to all of your, like, treacherous acts and all this stuff, and then when you leave, it's like, well, you can't really turn it off sometimes, because sometimes they'll log on to social media, but nowadays it does seem so different. Like, nobody really thinks that it's real, but then you'll get one of those tweets, and you know what I mean. Like, you'll get one of those,
but that's okay, because and I tell guys, like, when they're trying to figure out how do we blur the lines between reality and fiction. MJF is a perfect example. Like, I've seen him since he was just a kid training in New Jersey when me and Zach Allen used to do shows for Pro Wrestling Syndicate, and I think he rides that line pretty well. And there's been times recently where, me or a friend will reach out to him and be like, I don't know about that. Because now he's in AEW, and it's a little bit more public scrutiny. You can't be doing certain things. But I think in general, like, I think it's okay to kind of, even at the gimmick table sometimes, like, I don't want you to be like a complete ass to people, but like, I think you can still kind of make them believe that you're a bad guy to an extent without like completely berating them and insulting them, because I feel like if they're going to buy your merch, they're going to buy your merch because they're buying, they want to invest in the character, right? And if they weren't going to buy your merch because you insulted them, they weren't going to buy your merch in the first place, So like, you got to find that even keel, because people want to believe in the magic, they want to have those moments when they watch a show and they go, and it sounds super generic, but it's like, they see something like, oh, well, that's part of the story. But then you see another guy or another angle, and you're like, well, I don't know about that. It makes you question them. And that's what I wanted them to do with the Gregory Iron characters. Like, I knew for people to invest in me as a bad guy with a disability, I had to make fans, especially when I first started doing the bad guy thing, go, I think I hate Gregory Iron. I think he's like a piece of garbage outside of wrestling,
I think that's a special type of thing, to be able to conjure up a conflicted view. Like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I should hate him, type of thing.
Well, I mean, he does have a disability, but like, he seems like an ass.
When you're healing and there are people who are obviously digging your act, like enjoying it, do you prefer that they boo and go along with it, or do you mind if they like kind of cheer?
I guess it depends on the situation. I guess I prefer they go along with the story we're trying to tell, but sometimes the crowd makes that shift, and it challenges you, and it allows you to adapt and go to a place that maybe you didn't think you were going to go in the first place. The only reason why I became a heel initially was because after the CM Punk thing, there was a section in the crowd on the shows I would do in Cleveland that booed me because they thought it was cool, because the white meat babyface thing was getting stale, and so that forced me to go, when they pitched the bad guy thing, like, okay, how do I make this bad guy thing work? So it wasn't something that was planned, like, okay, this month you're going to turn heel, Greg. Yeah. It was, the crowd did that, and so I had to adapt to that. So it just depends on the situation. Like, for example, they just turned me a bad guy in Texas last weekend, and so I was cutting this promo to set it up, and sometimes it goes places you don't expect it to go. So I'm cutting this promo on a very white meat baby face, and I'm saying all these generic things, almost like Kurt Angle, like circa 2000, like sort of passive aggressive. And at one point I say, I haven't been having the best winning streak here in Texas, but I've been training really hard this week, and I've been taking care of my body, and we're in a bar. That's important to point out. And I go, I don't drink and I don't smoke, so I'm really taking care of my mind and my spirit. And the crowd starts booing, which is what I wanted, right? So I'm like, I got him now. And so legitimately, all week I was playing board games with my friend Josh, which is super dorky, right? Like, I wasn't going to go see anything in Texas. I was just playing board games. And I go, so, I've been training hard, my body, no smoking, no drinking, and I've been sitting around playing a lot of board games, give it up for board games, guys. And then I thought, of course, they'd be like, what a nerd, what a loser. But of course, I start getting this board games, board games. So I had him as a bad guy, and then they loved me again. So I was like, damn it.
What board games were you playing?
I wasn't actually playing like a board game. So Monopoly, but then there was
takes forever, man.
But I love Monopoly.
You are a heel.
And if I can find a attractive girl that loves Monopoly as much as me, like, you are the one for me. Because I'm convinced girls do not like Monopoly.
Nobody does.
No, that is incorrect. Okay, every New Year's Eve, me, M-Dog20, Johnny Gargano, and Candice LeRae play Monopoly or Fireball Island, okay? And it is tremendous, okay?
You just turned Johnny and Candice heel.
I did not.
Everybody.
I did not. It's a great game. Fun fact, and this is sad, actually. There was a phase that I often talk about where me and Johnny, we had no girlfriends, and this is like 2010, 2011. We were playing Monopoly like every night, but not actual board game Monopoly. I would hook up my Super Nintendo, and I had Monopoly for the Super Nintendo, and we would play it, and we would play against the computer, and his name was Jeeves, and he would just kick our ass at Monopoly. And I look back at that, and I bring it up to Johnny often. I go, boy, that was a dark day.
Yeah.
Those were real dark days.
My wife always tries to get me to play Monopoly, and I'm like, no, it takes forever. And I got an emulator, and I kept trying to play like the 64 version of the Super Nintendo. None of them worked, so I was kind of like,
you lucked out.
And I was at Walmart a few weeks ago, and I see that they've got like a new 10-minute Monopoly game.
Yes. Is it the card one?
I think so.
Because that's what I was gonna mention. We were playing. Me and my buddy were playing a lot of Monopoly deals. So it's basically a card game, and you're supposed to get it done like under 15 minutes, and it was pretty good.
Yeah. So as we wrap this up, I noticed that when you work, you're working all across the country, not just this country either. And a lot of people in the independent circuit they'll stick to like one regional area. How does that travel like affect you, impact you? Like, are you tired of the travel? How do you deal with it? I mean, I just came up here to Cleveland, and I'm like,
well, I'm a crazy person, so I don't mind the travel. It does get rough sometimes. I do get tired. Like just this past weekend, I flew from San Antonio straight to Buffalo, and it was like a late night in San Antonio. So the show got done at like 2 a.m. Then I ate food, and then I had to get on my plane by like 5.
Yeah.
And then, I slept for like 30 minutes on the plane, and that's airplane sleep, so it doesn't really count. And so then I had to wrestle in Buffalo, and then I got like a few hours of sleep after I wrestled in Buffalo. And basically the last 2 days was like sort of work and like sort of catching up on sleep. But it's like, I often tell my buddies when we're getting stressed out and down on ourselves and like all this travel and we're not home and we're beat up, it's like, if you ignore the fact that we're beating ourselves up, if the worst part about our job is that we have to be tired while we drive around with our friends, or we play fight with our friends, or like we're flying around to go hang out with our friends, or in some cases like we have these moments where we get to share the ring with guys that we only dreamed about sharing these moments with, and or in my case, like going to Stone Cold's house every once in a while, or talking to him on the phone, where it's like I could talk to him, but I have these 14-year-old Greg moments where I'm like, what the heck is happening, And I think if being tired from travel is the worst part of our job, then it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, you could be doing a lot worse than getting out of San Antonio. There's no wrong time to leave San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah.
There's no such a bad thing. You say red eye, get me out of here.
Hey, I don't mind
San
Texas,
Antonio.
man. It's pretty nice. In fact, hey, not to brag, but I did talk to Steve Austin on the phone while I was in Texas, and I told him that I've been there all week, and he's like, hell, you're in Texas so much, I might as well make you an honorary Texan. So that was official via phone call from Steve Austin.
That's a good one.
I'm a Texan now, so...
I remember you saying a while back that TNA had briefly shown some interest and then just didn't follow up, or it didn't end up happening. Trying to maybe reiterate that.
So I don't know what I talked about or what you heard, but so here's the story, and I don't know if I've actually even said this publicly before. So initially, there was this online petition that I did to get in the Royal Rumble back in 2012. Okay, so that wasn't my idea. It was kind of my idea, but like the idea was thrust upon me from Mike Quackenbush and Dave Lagana, okay? And so the idea that was pitched to me initially was we wanted to do something to hype our first iPay-per-view, the Chikara iPay-per-view, High Noon. And so we want someone to go online and say, I'm going to enter the Royal Rumble, I'm going to win. And they picked that to be me. And when they pitched it to me, I was still like only 5 years in wrestling. I remember in the moment thinking, that sounds dumb and terrible, because like any jabroni can just go like, hey, I'm not signed to WWE, but I want to be in the Royal Rumble, I'm going to win. And it just sounds stupid, right? So I remember being on the phone call with them and going, I had to think quick, and I was like, what if I make a video that says my dreams go to WrestleMania? And if I could get in the Royal Rumble with your help, perhaps I can make that dream come true. Because I think that sounds like a little better than saying, hey, I'm entering the Rumble. And so that happened. And
that is how people enter the Rumble these days, though.
Yeah. And then so, like, of course, after the fact, like, it didn't happen, and I never thought it was going to happen, but it got some traction. And then even to this day, there's some people that, like, tweet at me, like, bro, you never got in the Royal Rumble. And I'm just like, I never thought I was going to do it, right? But so the real story was, Dave Lagana ended up saying to me after the fact, the gut check that TNA started, he said, like, the gut check is a payoff for you to be in TNA. So I said, okay. So he said, just stay patient. And so I stayed patient, and we sort of kept exchanging emails. And then one night on Facebook, I got a message from DJ Z, who was Shima Zion at the time, and he was working for TNA. And he sent me a message, and he says, congratulations. And I said, on what? And he said, well, you signed to TNA, didn't you? And I said, no. And he said, oh, okay, well, you didn't hear any of what I'm about to tell you, but I heard Jeff Jarrett and Dave Lagana and a bunch of other writers talking about you, pitching some idea about when Crimson was getting hot. Mm-hmm. They were pitching some sort of idea where he was beating up, I can't remember exactly what was in the message. Maybe I'll have to look and tell you. But it was something to the effect of he was beating up little guys, and he wanted me to be one of those little guys, or beating up. I feel like it was different disabled people, and I'm thinking to myself, how many disabled people that can take bumps are you beating up? But I was supposed to be like the guy, and I was gonna like beat Crimson or something. And so then I hadn't talked to Lagana in a couple months. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, I won't say anything. And then like subtly, like a few days later, I send Lagana an email. I'm like, hey, we'll just check it in, see what's up. If you have any ideas for me, as if I didn't know. And then never got a reply for him, and I've never heard from Dave since. And it's just one of those things where it's like there's been these situations where with WWE or TNA or whatever the case may be, where it's like I feel like I'm on the cusp of something. And in these last 2 years, I really feel like more than ever, like I'm on the cusp of something. But I don't know what that is. So I'm just kind of trying to hang in there. And, the goal used to be WWE, but I think I've gotten to the point where it's like right now I'm making a living wrestling and speaking and podcasting. And as long as I can make money and contribute and get my artistic fulfillment through pro wrestling, then that's what's important. Would I like a contract somewhere? Absolutely, because that would definitely mean more stability. And I do think that with a character and a story like mine that I feel like you can't write, that if I never got signed to a contract, I feel like there's like a lot of money left on the table. And I say that because that's the term, but I don't mean like, oh, well, we're going to get rich off this. But I mean that in terms of like also, I know the interactions that I have with people on the independent level as far as like, to me, I'm just Greg, but there are people that come up to me and say, you inspire me and you motivate me and all that stuff. And if I can do that on a smaller independent scale, I can't imagine what I could do on a national or a worldwide platform. So that would be really cool if I can do that one day.
There's stories to be told there, and we hope you guys have enjoyed some of them that Gregory's told you today. Tell them where they can follow you on social media and about your podcast.
Well, you can tune into my podcast, Iron on Wrestling, every Wednesday. I drop the podcast, got a buttload of guests on there, including Johnny Gargano and Stone Cold Steve Austin and Gentleman Jervis, and there's about 20 episodes out there right now. A lot of good content for you, so check that out every Wednesday on iTunes or wherever you download podcasts. And then, of course, you can follow me on social media on Twitter at Gregory Iron, on Instagram at Gregory_Iron, and you can find me on Facebook at Gregory Iron. And if you can't remember that, www.gregory-iron.com.
He's made it easy for you guys. Leave a thumbs up, subscribe, tap that little bell down there so YouTube will let you know what we're doing. We're out.